Now, can people eat that way completely? It's very difficult for most people because the food availability, it's hard to find real food. You know, most of what you look for and most of what you find in the supermarkets, the whole middle part of the supermarket is just fancy boxes with this processed stuff that's so far removed from the food that we really ate, it's impossible to even recognize food in that. But we've been brainwashed by advertising. You know, if I had my way, I've talked about this before, a supermarket would look totally different than it looks now. I'd get rid of the entire middle of the supermarket and it would be a giant savanna. And I'd issue a spear when people walk in, and there'd be wild animals running around, and some streams, and a fishing rod and a spear to all people who come in. And if they wanted animal protein, that's how they'd have to get it. And all the whole periphery would be trees growing with fruits, not hybridized, not the sweet stuff that we are eating, because that's all changed. Our ancestors didn't eat such sweet fruits. We've developed such a sweet tooth that we're so addicted to sugar that even our fruits have to be sweeter than they used to be. If you've ever eaten a wild strawberry or wild blueberry, you know that they're tart, they're very sour, but they're loaded with nutrition. Most of the stuff that we eat now has really gotten less and less nutritious. You know, our organic food has much more vitamin and mineral content than conventionally grown. But wild-crafted food, truly food from the wild, that's not been commercially grown, is actually even higher in antioxidants, higher in vitamins, higher in minerals. So that would be the supermarket of the future. I don't see anybody rushing to open one up, but hopefully somebody will think about it. Excuse me? The animals will start hunting the people too. Yeah, we have to train the people before we throw them into the savannah with these wild animals. You're right. What about exercise? You know, exercise is one of the pillars. How do we exercise? Is there a way to look toward our ancestors to inform us how to exercise? What is exercise to our ancestors? Did any of our ancestors get on the road, put on running shorts and get on the road and start jogging at a slow pace for 4 hours straight and looking really miserable? Our ancestors exercised in order to survive. They exercised by trying to catch their food or gathering their food, or they were trying to escape from predators. And so it was a combination of some slow walking and gathering, maybe climbing, digging, gardening maybe, and some aggressive, fast-moving, heart-pounding exercise that was attempting to catch an animal in order to eat or to run away from a predator. What does that translate into today? Well, it would be brief interval workouts, brief bursts of activity with periods of rest or periods of slow activity. Fast, slow, fast, slow. And sure enough, the literature is coming out that's showing that this is much more effective cardiovascular. It actually increases heart rate variability, which is one of the measures of longevity. Heart rate variability, the ability of the heart rate to go up and down, the variability of beat to beat, the number of beats per minute changes from second to second, actually. That's a measure of longevity. People who have good heart rate variability, like you see in children or you see in certain kinds of athletes, that heart rate variability is correlated with long life. The more variability, the longer life. And marathon runners who run long distances, who don't really do interval training, who've lost that heart rate variability, actually that's correlated with shorter life. So it's not the long distance running itself that does it, but it's this constant metronome-like running at the same pace, keeping your heart rate at the same rate. That's not good for us. So varying our activity. And look at the way animals are active. Animals play. They play and they're active in order for purposeful reasons. And look at the way children are active. They play until they get tired and they sit down. And then they play again and then they sit down. That's probably the best kind of exercise for us. By the way, everything that I'm talking about actually has literature to back it up. You know, I've been talking about the hunter-gatherer diet for a little while. And you know, you probably have all heard about the Mediterranean diet, right? Most people think that the Mediterranean diet is the healthiest diet. And in fact, there have been lots of studies. People are studying the Mediterranean diet for quite a while. There have been a lot of studies which show that the Mediterranean diet is correlated with health. People tend to live longer, there's less cardiovascular disease, there's less cancer. Well, let's look at the Mediterranean diet and see what it is. The Mediterranean diet is very similar to hunter-gatherer diet, except it's got some dairy, small amounts, and some grains in it. Now, maybe it's better to eat a little grains and a little dairy. Shouldn't that be? Well, I've actually attended a number of lectures of people who espouse the Mediterranean diet, and also give lectures about food allergies. What are the most common food allergies? Grains and dairy, particularly wheat, gluten. But grains and dairy are the two most common food allergies. The only study that's ever compared the Mediterranean diet to a hunter-gatherer diet is a study done in Sweden in the last couple of months, actually, very, very recent, which showed that the Mediterranean diet was not as effective as the hunter-gatherer diet in lowering blood sugar and in reversing diabetes. So although the Mediterranean diet is a great step up from the standard American diet, it's still one step behind this diet that we're talking about, this hunter-gatherer diet. So we talked about diet, we talked about exercise. What about stress management? We live in a very, very different world than our ancestors did. How do you think our ancestors spent the day? Most of the time, they were probably just trying to survive. They were hunting, they were gathering, they were doing everything they can. They didn't really have a lot of thoughts about things. They weren't worried about starving to death. They were too busy making sure that they didn't. Most of us have a very different orientation. Most of us are focused on the future or worried about the past. And we have all these layers of worries. So we're under a lot of stress. Now, they were under stress, but the stress didn't involve these worries. The stress involved having to do what they had to do in order to survive. It's a very, very different level of worry. And if you've take a look at an animal, when they're finished eating or running around and playing, they're just like this. What are they doing? They're meditating. I mean, they're basically, either they're sleeping, they're eating, or they're meditating. You know, I sometimes watch my dog after I, play with him, and he just sits out there in the backyard. He's up like this, sniffing the air. It could be meditating. We don't know what he's doing, but he's certainly not worrying about where his next meal is going to come from. And that's really the way animals are, and that's the way human beings used to be. And stress management, or simply de-stressing, meditating, relaxing, and not really having much on your mind, is an important part of the day. It's something actually that needs to be structured into our days. We can't expect to be healthy without that. And what are the studies? Well, the studies show that if you meditate or you do some form of relaxation training, yoga, tai chi, or something like that, you have lower cortisol levels. Cortisol is the death hormone. It's the hormone that actually creates gradual deterioration of the body. So you have lower cortisol levels, and you have higher levels of DHEA, which is the positive adrenal hormones, the hormones that are anabolic for us. So we talked about diet, we talked about exercise, we talked about stress management. What about supplements? Our ancestors didn't have supplements. That surely can't be part of evolutionary wisdom. The problem is that we have changed our environment to such a degree, and we've depleted the soil to such a degree that supplements have become necessary in order to just get the nutritional content that our ancestors had in food. That's the sad truth. In fact, it's getting worse. Are most of you familiar with genetically modified food? Genetically modified food, Monsanto is perhaps one of the most dangerous corporations in existence, has created a push toward a monopoly over genetic food types. And they actually have they've actually been allowed to patent food, which is really scary when you think about it. But what happens is, the tendency now is to do mono farming, farming of one type of thing, one crop. And without rotation of crops, it tends to deplete the soil dramatically. And that soil depletion makes us miss out on a good portion of the minerals that would ordinarily be part of our soil.